So good morning, good day, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. I'd like to welcome you to part one of FHI 360's new series on gender, equity, and social inclusion in education. This is our virtual roundtable focused on adolescent girls' education. We want to first of all thank our roundtable hosts, USAID and the FCDO, as well as our event partners, CAMFED, Room to Read, and the government of Nigeria. We're really proud to convene this group of global leaders here today, and we're drawing from the UK government's significant investments and their international leadership on girls' education, as well as a number of initiatives spearheaded by the White House and by USAID. We hope that this roundtable will open up a dialogue around how these investments can be catalyzed even further. I'm Faye Rodway. I'm FHI 360's Senior Advisor for Education and Gender Equality, based here in the UK. Thank you for joining us today. A few reminders before we get started, and I can see people are still joining. Please note that your microphones will be muted throughout the event. As our participants today are joining us from various parts of the world, we ask that you be patient if anyone experiences technical difficulties with their connectivity. We invite you to participate and submit questions throughout the discussion in the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screen now. For those of you who are using American Sign Language, interpreters will be present throughout the program. Captioning is available and can be accessed by clicking on the CC button that you can see on the bottom of your screen. We also invite you to live tweet today, if you're able to, using the following hashtags: girls' education, gender equality, and social inclusion. And do follow us on Twitter. We're at FHI 360. Our London and Washington offices are uniquely positioned to bring together this particular group of global actors who are so deeply committed to girls' education. So today we really hope that this space we've convened for sharing their successes and the approaches adopted by USAID, FCDO, and their partners will help to foster even more sustainable partnerships, as well as reinforce those global commitments to adolescent girls in particular. We believe that this is the way to really create and foster systemic change. I'd like to hand over to my colleague and co-host, Yolande Miller-Granvaux now.
Hello, this is Yolande Miller-Granvaux. I am the Senior Strategy Advisor at the Global Education team here at FHI 360. So I'm very happy to be here, but I'm also very happy to introduce our new Chief Executive Officer for FHI 360, Dr. Tessie San Martin. Tessie is a vocal advocate for gender equality. She has dedicated a career to creating a better and more just world for people everywhere. And before joining FHI 360, Dr. San Martin was the CEO and president of Plan International USA, which you'll know, an international development and humanitarian organization that partners to support adolescent girls and children worldwide and to overcome oppression and gender equality. Tessie has over 30 years of experience working as an executive in the public and private sector with bilateral and multilateral agencies and with academia. She has been a forceful advocate for aid effectiveness. But Tessie is also an avid runner, and I'm sure there are a number of us here online, and she loves being with her family and with her dog. Tessie, we're just so happy to have us join us today.
Great, thank you, Yolande, for the kind introduction. And it is truly a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to open this important event which, as Faye said, is the first of what's going to be a series of events on gender equality and social inclusion in education, organized by our global education department, led by Yolande out of the Washington office and Faye out of our UK office. And this is such a timely event. You know, we have seen, of course, throughout the many decades, all kinds of disparities, right? Gender disparities when it comes to girls accessing and completing their secondary education. A lot of progress made on the primary level to creating more gender parity, and those disparities continue, you know, tend to get accentuated at the secondary school level. Nevertheless, before the pandemic, some progress had been made. And of course, the pandemic, in this case, as in so many others, really rolled back whatever progress we had experienced. And this is obviously unacceptable. On this 2021 International Day of the Girl, we must recommit to creating gender parity in secondary school attendance and graduation rates. Nothing less than that is acceptable. Now, the barriers that keep girls from returning to school, and remember, you know, schools closed down, schools have reopened, and we are seeing in too many places a disproportionately less number of girls returning to school compared to boys. And we know all of the reasons why this is happening. And I would say that this issue of barriers preventing girls from accessing secondary school is what I think the term of the art is, it's a wicked problem, right? Wicked problems are complex problems that defy easy solution identification, and the solutions themselves, right, tend to not be stable. And why do I get into all of that? It's to make the point that in these types of problems, no one discipline, no one organization, no one set of experts has all of the answers. And this is why strong partnerships, relentless collaboration, including working across disciplines, as we're doing here with this group that's convened, you know, education, health experts, behavioral scientists. This is the type of cross-discipline, cross-sectoral collaboration that we need to see more of. It is why we're honored today to have all of the experts that are here with us, and welcome USAID, FCDO, CAMFED, Room to Read, and others to this important conversation. But let me just be provocative and tell you one other thing. So all of these experts, all of these donors, all of the research organizations, all of that is great. But what is also essential is a deep contextualization, right, of whatever approaches we're finding. What I mean by that is to acknowledge that if these programs are meant to help you know, work with girls to enable better access to and better probability of completing secondary education, if this is about the adolescent girls, then I would propose that all the programs that we're doing in this regard must be not just influenced by the perspective of the adolescent girls themselves, but to a certain extent, they need to be at the center. They need to be leading these efforts. They are the best experts on what are the factors that are affecting them in their context. And what does this mean for all of us convened in this virtual room? It means that we need to be able and willing to step back and redesign how we work in this space, in this area, to create that space, that opportunity for these local voices to not just be heard, but really be leading the charge. It is why I am so excited to have with us in this conversation two young women with which we and our partners have been working in Vietnam and Zambia. Their perspectives, their leadership is essential in this effort. So look, that's it for me. I don't want to belabor the point. There's a lot of important conversation to be had. I look forward to the conversation today and to more opportunities to convene global expertise and local knowledge on these issues to tackle these problems. So I will stop here, and Yolande, pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessie. Did I tell you all that Tessie was a passionate advocate? This is just wonderful. She just set the tone for this conversation today. But this conversation would not be possible without our roundtable hosts, FCDO and USAID. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, Liana Marr from USAID. Liana is the Acting Deputy Assistant Administrator and Acting U.S. Senior Coordinator for International Basic Education Assistance for the Bureau for Development, Democracy, and Innovation at USAID. I've had the immense pleasure of knowing Liana for many years. Beyond Washington, D.C., her work with USAID has taken her in many parts of the world, from Guinea to South Sudan, from Sudan to Macedonia and to Morocco. Prior to USAID, she was a Peace Corps director in Guinea. Liana, we're just so happy to convene this conversation with USAID and FCDO, with you and Sally. Thank you for being here today. On to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Yolande. And actually, Yolande was one of my first mentors and helpers at USAID when I joined the Foreign Service. So it's great to be here with you. And just a huge thanks to FHI 360 and the entire team there for organizing this much needed conversation and for being such a great partner with USAID. I'd also just like to thank CAMFED. I'm such a big fan of the work you do promoting girls' education and, of course, Room to Read. I started my career as an adult literacy practitioner a long time ago, and the work you do promoting literacy is critical, so thank you for that. Of course, I do want also to thank FCDO. I'm just delighted to have one more opportunity for USAID and FCDO to continue our partnership and joint efforts to promote foundational skills and girls' education. I do believe that I have a PowerPoint that should come up. And while you're bringing that up, well, I love that picture, so we should just stop there for a minute. We are the future leaders. I did want to take a moment to just elaborate a little bit on our partnership with FCDO, because I think partnerships are so important, and it's part of the theme of what I want to talk about today is the need for more collaboration and partnership. But USAID's collaboration with the UK in education runs deep and across all areas and locales. In the education sector, we work together at the global level through the Board of Directors of GPE, the Executive Committee of Education Cannot Wait, the Global Book Alliance, the Steering Committee of Building Evidence in Education, and many other forums. We greatly appreciate the UK's leadership on girls' education during this year's G7 presidency. Under the UK's leadership, we collaborated with other G7 members on the Declaration on Girls' Education. They really kept girls' education at the top of the agenda during the D7, which is so important. We've also collaborated with the UK on programming in multiple countries. We know we are more effective if we work together, and we really need to move, and we are moving beyond the concept of donor coordination as just information sharing, but a true partnership where we're doing joint designs, where we are co-financing activities, where we are sharing research, lessons learned. In every aspect, we need to be partnering. I'd like to just give one example of this. USAID Somalia is very proud to partner with the UK on the Adolescent Girls Education Somali program, also known as AGES. In July of 2021, USAID announced a new $15 million contribution to the UK-supported AGES program. This program is focused on improving access to quality education for young Somali women and girls. The UK, through AGES, was already supporting 42,000 adolescent girls to access primary school, accelerated basic education, and non-formal courses tailored to their needs. With the additional USAID funding, nearly 40,000 more adolescent girls and young women aged 15 to 24 who have never attended school will get the chance to improve their lives. Together, we are providing educational opportunities to 80,000 girls and young women in regions disproportionately impacted by protracted crisis and disruptions, and also disruptions and displacements due to climate-related disasters. As USAID Somalia Mission Director Patrick Disson said, USAID is very excited to contribute to this successful UK-led initiative in order to provide more young Somali women with the foundational education they lack, yet so rightly deserve. I believe Sally is going to cover a couple of other examples of our collaboration in the field. But I just want to say in this Somali example, how much sense it made for USAID to contribute to an existing program. It gets programming up and running more rapidly. We share overhead costs. It makes dollar sense. It's just really a good model of how we should all be working as donors together. So a big thanks to each and every panel member. We appreciate your partnership, and together we really are stronger. If we could go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to take a moment to break down the barriers to adolescent girls' education. We engage in programming like AGES because we know that empowerment of women and girls, including access to education, is critical to the achievement of development and humanitarian outcomes. There is an urgent and ongoing need to break down gender-related barriers to safe, quality, inclusive education, especially for girls and women. According to UNESCO, worldwide, 15 million girls and 10 million boys will never set foot in a classroom. Refugee girls are half as likely as their male counterpart to be in secondary school. 2/3 of the 750 million illiterate adults are women, a proportion that has remained unchanged since 1976, the earliest date available, data was available for a world total. 650 million girls and women are married before the age of 18, most often meaning a disruption to their education. Nearly 1 billion girls and women lack the skills to succeed in rapidly changing job markets. And women make up only 35% of higher education students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This is simply unacceptable. As a literacy practitioner since the 1980s, this both breaks my heart and infuriates me. We must do more. We must invest in research. We must implement evidence-based approaches. We must strengthen our partnerships. As women, we should no longer accept the status quo, and we should make some good trouble together, I think. We can no longer allow for these abysmal statistics to continue. We know that when adolescent girls are educated, their lives, the lives of their families, their communities, and their countries improve. We know that investing in girls' education gives us one of the highest returns on development investments that we can make. One recent study indicates that for every dollar invested into girls' rights and education, developing countries could see a return of $2.80. And one additional year of schooling can increase a woman's earning by 10 to 20%. But it's so much more than about GDP. It's the livelihoods and the dignity of all of our young people that is at stake. USAID is doing in girls' education and with adolescent girls. To help ensure that young people around the world can reach their full potential, the United States is the largest bilateral funding of international basic education. In fiscal year 2020, the US government provided more than 24 million primary and secondary students in 53 countries with opportunities to learn literacy, numeracy, and other basic skills. We distributed more than 31 million textbooks and other teaching and learning materials, and provided education to approximately 12 million women and girls. USAID works to break down gender-related barriers to education so that all learners, especially girls and women, and gender and sexual minorities, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex youth, have access to quality learning opportunities from pre-primary through higher education. And I'd just like to emphasize here that it's important that we continue to work with girls and women. But when we talk about gender, we need to go beyond the binary definition. We know that gender and sexual minorities, like women and girls, are discriminated against and are victims of gender-based violence. And this is true in the education sector. I also want to emphasize how critical work is around foundational skills. By ensuring that all girls and all students gain foundational literacy, numeracy, and social emotional skills in the early years of education, we are laying the groundwork for future success. You cannot advance to secondary school or employability training without these essential skills. If we get it right in the beginning, in the early years, it's more cost effective, and it really does give girls a leg up and a head start. We recognize that adolescent girls face a unique set of barriers to accessing quality learning opportunities, including safety, health, and social bias in their communities and classrooms. I want to share just a few examples to illustrate some of USAID's holistic and cross-sector support to help adolescent girls overcome these challenges last year. If we could move to the next slide, please. In Ethiopia, USAID's Reading for Ethiopia's Achievement Development, boy, that's a tough title, sorry. We love these long acronyms at USAID. USAID's Reading for Ethiopia's Achievement Developed, or READ2, supported the development of gender club guidelines and trained school gender club coordinators. READ2 also produced and broadcast a 13-episode radio drama to promote reflection, dialogue, and behavior change around gender and school-related gender-based violence. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about Haiti. USAID's Wash in Schools component of the Community-Driven Development Project provided 1,500 students, 56% of whom were girls, with access to clean water and improved sanitation. The project provided modern and private toilets to reduce wait times for girls during recreation breaks, added a ramp for disability access, and added separate changing rooms to meet menstrual and other hygiene needs. Next slide, please. And in Tanzania, USAID's Advancing Youth activity trained 1,467 young women in livelihood and income generating opportunities, transforming them from economic contributors to economic drivers. 1,117 female-led micro-enterprises were established or improved. AY provided leadership skills training to young females, many of whom vied for leadership positions in their communities. AY also provided 5,129 women with referrals to family planning, sexual and reproductive health, and nutrition services. So I wanted to use these examples because I think that they provide a great example of what Tess was talking about earlier, the need for cross-sectoral whole of person approaches if we're going to get all adolescent girls into education and with opportunities. If we could go to the next slide, I just want to close with talking about some of the new policies coming out with the US government. So I'm taking it back up to the policy level. The US government will continue to lead, especially to promote foundational learning and to break down gender-related barriers. The Biden-Harris administration announced commitments at the Generation Equality Forum, reflecting domestic and global priorities, including policy and resource commitments to 1, prevent and respond to all forms of gender-based violence, 2, strengthen women's economic security, and 3, protect and advance sexual and reproductive health rights. In March of this year, President Biden signed an executive order that established the White House Gender Policy Council and mandated the new whole of government US strategy for gender equity and equality, based on a recognition that the full participation of all people, including women and girls, across all aspects of our society is essential to the economic well-being, health, and security of our nation and of the world. The forthcoming strategy will lay out the Biden-Harris administration's vision of how we will advance the rights and opportunities of women and girls in all their diversity, both in the United States and around the world. USAID is also launching a new youth policy expected in early 2022 that includes a key principle on meaningful inclusion of diverse groups of young people based on gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. USAID's Ages and Stages approach to youth development specifically highlights the unique needs of adolescent girls and youth programming. We look forward to continued cooperation to increase access to education, improve learning outcomes, especially for girls, refugees, internally displaced communities, gender and sexual minorities, and children with disabilities. I thank you so much for this opportunity to be here with so many great women today. Thank you.
This is Yolande. Liana, this is so terrific. This is just such an inspiration. So thank you very much. Faye, I'll let you introduce Sally.
Thank you, Yolande. And thank you also, Liana, for that wonderful presentation. To follow and understand the power of the collaboration between these two donors, that was really important for us to hear. And also to hear that USAID's commitment is strong and remaining. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who's Sally Gear from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office here in the UK, the FCDO. Sally is the head of profession for education at the FCDO and leads a formidable technical cadre of education advisors working all over the world. Prior to her career at the FCDO, Sally lectured in social development and gender at University of Manchester, has worked for the British Council as their regional education advisor for Africa, and also for VSO as their education and gender advisor. Sally's also served on UNGAI's Global Advisory Committee and has been a long-standing champion for girls' education. I think most of you on the call here today will know her as one of the architects of what became the largest fund focused specifically on girls' education, the FCDO's Girls' Education Challenge Fund. And we're really, really pleased to have Sally's passion as well as her technical expertise as part of our panel here today. Sally?
Lovely, what a lovely welcome, thank you. And just to welcome our participants, I have looked at this 203, which is great, because I always go for like anything more than one is a good thing, so that's great. Thank you for joining us, and also thank you. In the chat I saw folks who are leading work at country level in Uganda and Kenya and Rwanda, so just, you know, all our global stuff is only relevant when it's delivered at country level. So thank you for joining and thank you for bearing with us. And I hope what we give you is useful, but please challenge us and ask questions when we get to that point. So I'm head of profession for education in the FCDO. I noticed you have FCO there, so I'll get in trouble for, so we need to put development in there, because development is still really, really important for the UK government, and girls' education is really, really important for the UK government, and it provides us with an opportunity. Just as Faye said, I've been involved in this area for a long time, and and the US has always been a big partner, a really big partner, and you know, obviously we all have different sort of fiscal challenges in terms of how much resources we can give, but in terms of the agenda, I've worked with many administrations, and actually there's been consistency through the years over the last decade or so. So, you know, thank you for that. I'm really looking forward to working in the future, and we've got a really strong political commitment on girls' education, so that's really positive. So I'm just going to start off with, we've got a Girls' Education Action Plan, which is publicly available. You may have seen it. And it's 5 years of global action, working with our partners. And as I've just said, the US is a hugely important partner for us. So every girl goes to school, stays safe and learns. And I'm going to come back to that staying safe issue, because I think it's very relevant in the COVID response. We've got a big ambition. We've worked with you and other important partners on the G7, but let's go to the next slide, because it sort of sets out a little bit more detail what the 3 pillars are. Thank you. So there's a global coalition on girls learning. So we know the evidence, and I'll come back to that in a moment, on adolescent girls, that all the benefits we've talked about over the years, and I've been very involved with, is really clear that unless girls come out of school or a learning environment with literacy, numeracy, and clear learning, all those benefits that we talk about, which is a mother being educated has, you know, better health outcomes, that we've got evidence now that shows that it doesn't work just girls going to school. They need to learn. And so that's a really important element of where we're going in the future. So we can't lose that. It's not just about access. It's absolutely needs to be about learning outcomes. So the second pillar is about galvanizing international action. And as you know, you probably are all aware on this call, we've recently merged with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. We used to be DFID, we're now the FCDO, but that gives us an opportunity. It gives us a really big opportunity to work with 150 countries and political ambition to broaden the campaign. And whether these countries are donor countries or whether these countries that have gender equality issues in their own countries, let's broaden our scope and impact. And the last pillar is about global goods to support bold education reforms. So this is about evidence, and I'm sure a lot of colleagues on the call know about some of the work that we've done in investing in really important evidence on not what works is a glib way of framing it, but it's really looking at evidence for systematic reform that works for girls. So there's they're the sort of broad three pillars of action that we've committed to over the next 5 years. So maybe if we can go to the next slide, if that's great. Yeah, so the global target we have now is 40 more girls in school and 20 more girls reading by age of 10 or the end of primary in low and middle income countries. It's hugely ambitious, and it's hugely ambitious as I will, am I speaking too quickly? Sorry, Christina. Yes, I know I do speak quickly. I'll slow down. Okay, so this global commitment is incredibly ambitious in the context of COVID-19. But for many of us who've worked in girls' education over the years, when I tell this story a lot, when I had to fight to have half an hour on gender and education in a training session, this is a carpe diem moment. And we all have our frustrations about methodology and how we're going to do it. But this is really important. We have a political commitment at a G7 presidency level to do this. So if ever there was a moment, this is now. So in terms of what we're doing, we really have got a clear focus on a roadmap to our contribution. But, you know, all those on the call, this can't be done by the UK alone. It has to be done with partners. But it is a real moment. I just want to emphasize that, because again, for those of us who've been around a while, this is exceptional. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit on COVID-19 and returning to learning. So next slide, because this is just a picture slide. Yeah. So over the last 18 months, the FCDO work and our work with our bilateral education programs, and also with the wonderful work that GBE and ECW and all of the education community have been doing. And just as an aside, I'd like to say that, again, in my experience, there's been a real coalition of the committed in the COVID response. We're really impressed by the international community and bilateral donors coming together on raising the fact that COVID-19 was not just a health issue, it was also an education issue. And I personally think it's been a really great moment of coordination and coherence, and I'd really like that to go forward. So for FCDO, we were very So we looked at the research on the Ebola crisis, which we were very involved in Sierra Leone in particular, but other countries in West Africa. And there was some good research there about the impact on education. So we built on that initially to see how a health pandemic might impact on education and where were the factors. And so building on that research, obviously we have never experienced globally a global wide pandemic response. But what we learned from that particular situation was safety was really key. And as educationalists, we might have jumped to let's keep children learning. But what we learned was that moving away from a protective environment of schooling had implications, and there was no follow-on, particularly for the marginalized children. So safety, child protection, and then absolutely trying to maintain learning. But also what we learned from that experience was distance learning was not high level EdTech necessarily, but it was printed materials, it was community based. And this presentation is about COVID, but we've done another bit of research which we'll share internationally on this, and we're still learning. And I guess the other point here is that we're still in that situation in many countries. So for example, in Uganda, schools aren't open yet. They've been shut for 22 months. So let's not pretend that this is something that's just over and we're moving into a new situation. So we've been very much involved in COVID-19. And so now we need to move beyond. The other issue that isn't here is about the inequality, and particularly we have in Sierra Leone, there was clear evidence that unfortunately adolescent girls' pregnancy rates increased during that period, and they didn't return to school. So we knew already, as others have said, that adolescent girls in particular had a more detrimental impact during that period. Next slide, please. So just to give some examples of the work we've done, I don't need to read it through, but we supported, most of our programs had to be redirected. So in Nigeria, we supported learners through TV, radio, but also this element of child protection was really key. And let's go to the next slide. I don't want to take too much time. So this is current predictions from the World Bank. I'm sure many on the call have seen this about the increase in learning poverty and the slow progress predicted in girls' enrollment. So we still need to get, we're waiting for the evidence over the last 18 months, but this is just giving you an idea of the ambition that we need to have to reach these targets, but also recognizing the impact of COVID. Next slide, please. So just to go on to, really this is emphasizing the points that Leanna made before about the US and UK education partnership. So high level objective to improve children's learning outcomes and expand access to basic education, particularly girls and other marginalized and vulnerable groups. Go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So at the global level, so the more you look at research, the more you see that this focus of this discussion today is on adolescent girls, and we'll come to that when we have our panel discussion. But all the evidence is showing that if we get the foundational learning level right for girls and boys, that certainly by the age of 10 or 12, that if they have basic literacy, basic numeracy at that age, their life chances will be greater going forward. So in the future, and I'll come, we need to address the present, we absolutely need to ensure that that takes place. So I think we're partnering with our colleagues in the US on that particular issue. Equally, as Leanna has said, on the Global Partnership of Education and Education Cannot Wait, ensuring, you know, these two really important global funds are well funded and working effectively together, particularly in the issue of emergencies and protracted crisis, because we know the majority of girls that are out of school are living in those countries where there's conflict. So that's an important area that we're sharing with the US, with our US colleagues on. On climate, we know that obviously the UK is hosting COP26 this year, but we know that there's a clear link with girls' education, particularly as we know in situations of climate related disaster, marginalized girls are, again, like in COVID, they already have a very tentative relationship with education anyway, and a disaster hits, they're much less likely to be able to go back into school, and obviously that will impact to the future. So there's definitely a clear link there. And then we're working also on innovative financing, and then finally on the global education data that's needed. So on a global level, these are the areas that we're really committed to working very closely with our long-standing colleagues on girls' education. If we move to the next slide, I'll just briefly look at country level. Again, as Leanna has mentioned, we've got really specific examples in Somalia, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Myanmar, with a focus on addressing children's foundational skills. So those global priorities that I spoke about previously, really operationalizing them at country level. And we've got some concrete examples there, and also working with the World Bank on their Foundational Learning Compact and GP's new operational model. Next slide. So these are examples, and we can share these afterwards, of the collaboration in Myanmar. Obviously, really challenging context, and we are still, we worked very closely with USAID on this. And if you go to the next slide, we can also see an example of Kenya and Tusami Let's Read, which is a really clear pilot, which has been really well evaluated, about teaching at the right level, which is so important when children get back to school after COVID. So, and it may be that we need to recalibrate where children are at. So we absolutely need to use this methodology going forward. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. That's it. So there's lots more to talk about when we have our panel discussion. I hope that was helpful. And it's just been, just to reiterate just how much we value the partnership with USAID, and looking forward to the discussion and your comments and questions and challenges as we go forward in the next part of the session. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Juliana. These are very forward-looking presentations, and you set us up for the present, but the future. So thank you so much for doing that. Now we will move into our panel discussion, and we're trying to walk the talk here. Percy said at the beginning, let's put the adolescent girls and the young women at the center of our discussions. That's what we're doing today. So we have Natasha Luanda from Zambia, who will moderate the whole panel. And Natasha is the chairperson of the CAMFED Association, and she was elected to that position in 2020. But I have to tell you, Natasha started out walking 10 miles every day to school, barefoot. And then she had all these, family who was struggling with paying school fees. CAMFED came to the rescue, and Natasha just excelled and went through all the milestones of education. She graduated from high school, she graduated from university, and now here she is with us. So Natasha, what an honor, what a pleasure, and the world is yours right now.
Thank you so much, Yolande. Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Luanda. I am happy to be here, and I'm so excited to be moderating this panel of great change makers. My time as an adolescent was not the easiest. We faced so many challenges with my fellow adolescents that time, growing up in an environment with very few schools around. Many girls my age dropped out, married off, or could not continue with school because of the many challenges that we are facing at that time. We walked very long distances to and from school. We lacked proper sanitary wear, and often we went to school on an empty stomach. The sanitation facilities in the schools we attended were very poor, and this left us with no option but to abscond classes a few days every month, which was very bad. Along with all of you, I'm hoping to bring positive change to the lives of many adolescent girls in the world. In addition to our USAID and FCDO representatives, some other voices of change that we have with us are my colleague Barbara Chilangwa, who is the Executive Advisor for Government Relations at CAMFED, and also Geetha Murai, who is the CEO at Room to Read. Thank you. So Barbara and Geetha, after hearing from Liana and Sally on the approaches to adolescent girls' education from their respective organizations, what is your response to their presentations? Geetha, you may want to take this question first.
Thank you, Natasha, and just really excited to be here with you today, as well as Dewey from our program. Your voices are so much more interesting than what I have to say, but I appreciate being given the opportunity. It is great to be a part of an event that is with FCDO and USAID, particularly hearing from Sally and Leanne as they shine a light on this, on the importance of girls' education. But what I found striking was also the emphasis on ensuring that we're not leaving foundational skills behind. And the dynamic between those two issues speak very clearly to Room to Read's two core mission areas. And right now the needs are great. And these institutions have powerful leadership roles in this space. The collective focus on learning, system reform, inclusion, they're all key to creating sustainable change for girls at scale. And given FCDO's investment in programming with adolescent girls and influence in gaining support for the new targets of 40 million more girls in school, 20 million more girls reading by age 10, we do have a lot to gain from your results and insights as implementing organizations. Like many, I'm also very pleased that USAID is looking at this issue closely, building off of strong foundations of Let Girls Learn and evidence-based approaches to basic education programming. And it's also great to see the consideration of the intersection of education with emergencies and climate and other thematic areas that are of critical importance to young people today. I was particularly appreciative of the importance of local leadership and activists, as well as fully leveraging local infrastructure in the broadest sense of the term to respond quickly to the changing circumstances we all saw over the last 18 months. And that was critical to the success of Room to Read's interventions. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But as an organization like Room to Read that is 93% privately funded, the importance of innovative financing and the collaboration associated, I think, is incredibly important. We can accomplish so much more when we bring diverse funders together with varying networks of influence. Also, as a data-driven organization, we're very keen to see open access to global education data and provide access to ours, so that there is collective strength behind the interventions we choose to scale in girls' education. And with more alignment, we think we can find some great efficiencies and opportunities to gain stronger results faster. Finally, I think I speak for a number of implementing organizations who work with girls when I say we're impatient. We're impatient to see more partnership and direct action to accelerate progress for girls. And FCDO and USAID are great catalysts in making such partnerships happen and that action happen. So I'm excited to see that, especially given their collective efforts to highlight girls' education with the G7 and the efforts towards policy commitment. So a big thank you to both organizations for those efforts and for setting bold targets to rally around. I am hopeful that we can continue to see that momentum translated into large-scale girls' education and gender initiatives, and that we couple that with the operational excellence and the system reform that's needed to support these new targets, and hopefully more quickly move towards a gender equal world. And I just will end by encouraging us to hold ourselves to what Leanna said. I loved her quote, "Let's get into some good trouble together." Thanks.
Thank you so much, Geetha, for that wonderful response. So Geetha, we know what works. We know the approaches and investments that help girls, and especially adolescent girls, stay in school. Yet we have about 120 million adolescent girls who are out of school, either because they never went or had dropped out. What does it take to cover that last mile?
It's a great question. We do know many of the ingredients needed to support girls to succeed in school and beyond, and to become fulfilled and able to realize their aspirations. But as you said, 120 million girls out of school. And depending on what age ranges you look at, that's already 14 to 20% of the world's adolescent girl population, let alone the large number of girls that are in school and not succeeding because either a lack of quality education or ingrained gender attitudes and norms that put them at a disadvantage. For example, something as simple as gender insensitive messages that may be delivered through textbooks on a regular basis can do huge damage to our efforts at scale. So while we all want to get to the day that we're only focused on the last mile, the issues we're trying to address around gender inequality as it exists throughout the system are far more broad-reaching and entrenched. And of course, the most marginalized girls will need added supports in a wide range of areas. But in general, we need to consider programs that account for the enormous size of this issue. And when it comes to what we know works and where we need to further our efforts, we recognized for a long time that girls need access to life skills development, high quality learning materials, trained teachers, mentors, role models, family and community support. They need access to essential information on topics that impact their choices, sexual and reproductive health, financial education, climate justice. We know that this work can only happen through cohorts because selective individual support does not maximize either the individual or the societal gains for a couple of reasons. First, girls learn from each other, and their collective efforts ensure that 1 + 1 equals a lot more than 2. And second, sustainable societal change can only happen when the system, local infrastructure, communities, centers of power all support these girls, and they're not fighting for change alone. And this last 2 years has shown us, beyond access to quality materials and the use of local infrastructure, be it technology or other distribution channels, human connectivity is essential to continue to support and encourage girls to overcome their challenges. And that's why, even though at Room to Read, we broadcast life skills lessons across most of our programmed countries, we reach unprecedented numbers of families. For example, in Bangladesh, something like 32 million households were broadcast girls' education television episodes. We ensured simultaneously that remote mentoring continued in our implementation areas so the human connection persisted. And as context, our community-based mentors provided more than 400,000 remote mentoring sessions over phone, video calls, 3.3 million direct messages across SMS. And we know that these individual remote mentoring sessions, we know through those mentoring sessions that many girls were at risk of dropping out. The response rates varied, but something like 20 to 60% of the girls at risk of not returning based on the countries. And that indicated that they had families that lost income. They were struggling to keep up with their studies at home. But at the end of 2020, when we assessed the percentage of program participants returning to school when schools had reopened, 99% or so in the countries that we work in our programs were returning. So the life skills and mentoring support that's rooted in human connection fosters that type of resilience. And that's something that we want to make sure that we continue to stay focused on. And you'll hear directly from Dewey, a young woman that participates in our program a little bit later today about some of that. But those are the things that come to mind when we think about what works and how we're going to continue to make scalable change.
Very wonderful, Geeta. I'm going to pose the question again, just so everyone on the panel gets it and is able to also respond to it. So thank you so much, Geeta, for that wonderful response to the question. So our question to our panelists is, we know what works, we know the apertures and the investments that help girls and especially adolescent girls stay in school. Yet we have about 120 million adolescent girls who are out of school, either because they never went or had to drop out. What does it take to cover the last mile?
Is it okay if I just hop in? Yeah, okay. You know, I think there's so many things that it takes, and looking at research and evidence-based approaches is really important. But one point I really, really want to make here is that it's not just about getting girls into school and keeping them into school, because let's face it, we are getting girls and female adolescents into male-dominated education systems. You know, when you look across the spectrum and you look across the education workforce, women tend to hold the lower paying jobs at the lower levels of the system. Men tend to be more represented at the junior and senior high school levels, where they're working with vulnerable adolescent girls. Men tend to dominate the positions of being school leaders and principals, of being inspectors. And when you walk into a Ministry of Education, I don't care what country you're in, you see a lot more men sitting in those seats. So I really think that we have to look at women's leadership within these systems. It's so important. Just imagine how a school might respond differently to sexual harassment if there were more female teachers and principals at that school. We would probably see fewer girls sweeping the classroom in the courtyards and having more time for their studies. Imagine how policy in countries would be more supportive surrounding issues of early pregnancy and marriage if we had more females in roles at the Ministry of Education making national policy and more female ministers of education. Imagine how much more girls would imagine for themselves if they had more female role models throughout the entire spectrum of the education system. It's really imperative that we focus on interventions for the girls themselves in the education, but we also have to fix the education system and make sure it's more inclusive and equitable. So I just wanted to make sure that I got that point across. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liana. Next person on the panel is to respond to the question.
Natasha, did you want me to come in?
Yes, Sally, you may come in.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I completely agree on role models. I think that's hugely important. In terms of the number of adolescent girls outside of school, so I think in terms of education, I guess in a way, I think there's probably two groups. So there is girls who can potentially come back into the formal education system, and we're probably looking at maybe younger age groups. So, you know, there's a chance to have, you know, that we know how to do programs on that, but there are going to be girls, marginalized girls. And I think, again, when we talk about girls, I think it is really important that we also have we look at socioeconomic status, because there are, you know, the difference. There's some great charts available if you look at the Real Centre on urban boys versus rural girls, and that brings in the different socioeconomic and status. So obviously, you know, there is that interrelationship that we need to think about. Because obviously, if we look at it with a gender lens, they're going to be very marginalized boys as well in certain contexts that need certain interventions too. So let's just be clear about that when we design programs. But so in terms of the challenge I think we have as an education community is we absolutely fundamentally in the future need to ensure that every girl who before she's age 10 has foundational literacy and numeracy, because we've got loads of evidence to show that even if they drop out of school after that, they have the power for the future to be able to come back to education, be able to do future skills learning, etc. But the challenge we have is that there are a number of girls now who don't have that and will not go back into primary school because they're too old. They obviously won't go back into secondary school because that's too higher level. So I think we need to be clear about who we're supporting and what the options are. We've got really good evidence. So, I mean, in the future, there's an urgency to make sure that we have a system that works on foundational learning for all children, even the most marginalized. And that's tricky. And we can't go into the detail here, but there's a lot of work going on now about what that looks like. But I think there's also the importance of still maintaining targeted approaches to marginalized adolescent girls who aren't ever going to come back into a formal education system. They're never going to have that opportunity. So we need to have programs which ensures that we have catch up, all those sorts of programs. And we need to work that out amongst donors to get that balance right and know our community. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a combined approach, because one is looking to the future and one is actually addressing the crisis we have now with girls who will never go back to formal education. So it's important that we get that nuanced approach. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. It's good to have you back, Barbara, on the platform. I would just need to maybe pose the question again, just so Barbara can be on the same page with us. So Barbara, we were discussing what it would take to cover the last mile for the 120 million adolescent girls who are out of school, either because they never started or because they dropped out of school on the way. So we'll just need you to share with us what it takes to cover the last mile.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and it's good to be on the panel. I think the last mile requires sustained prioritization of girls' education, backed by long-term plans, national budgets of more than 20%, and clear implementation frameworks. But more importantly, it requires a well-structured response built on solid partnerships like the ones that we've listened to between FCDO and USAID, but also at community level. And the solid partnerships like what we have also witnessed during the outbreak of the COVID-19. And I think the two presenters from FCDO and USAID have really highlighted the importance of partnerships in times of crisis. And in our countries where CAMFID works, for example, we saw that all the stakeholders led by government, including development partners, private sector, CSOs, community members, young women, they all rallied behind the issue in a coordinated way with strategies that target the marginalized, especially the girls at risk of dropping out. And I actually think that the crisis of the adolescent girls and education is in itself a pandemic, requiring that partnership and that urgent response that we have seen during the crisis. And I want to agree also that because the crisis really evolved into an education crisis, we saw that with so many girls staying at home after the closure of schools, so many of them were not able to return to school, and that the interventions that, for example, the Commonwealth Association, the Young Women Alumni, to which you belong, Natasha, stepped up and undertook, I think, community work, ensuring that girls are engaged throughout the closure of the schools. They also ensured that of protection because we knew that the safety of the school environment did no longer apply because they were at home for long periods. We found that it was those interventions that were done in a collaborative manner and that were done at community level that worked well to ensure that the 98%, and I want to vouch for the fact that even in the countries where we work, 98% of our girls returned to school when schools reopened because of the interventions that their colleagues who had lived experience were undertaking during the COVID closure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that wonderful response. Very insightful information for all of you, from all of you. Thank you so much. Our panelists for those responses. So right now, I'm just going to hand it over to Yolande, just so we can pick some of the live questions and get responses from.
Thank you, Natasha. What a wonderful moderating job you're doing. This is just, it's not easy. Thank you, and welcome, Barbara. So we will go into a few questions, asking for brief answers because of time issues. I'll start with USAID and FCDO, Liana and Sally. 3 questions, if you can tie them together. One is, what are we doing with governments to provide safe infrastructure for girls? 2, disability. To what extent are your agencies providing services for disability programs and affecting girls? And the third one is gender-based violence. What are we doing for violence against girls? Huge questions, brief answers, but you've done that before. Liana, do you want to start? And then Sally?
Sure, and I'll try to be really quick. So I'm going to start with the question of disability. So it's extremely important, and it's a huge part of USAID's education policy. We really work on this on multiple fronts. We've recently designed a toolkit for universal design to learning. And we are trying to promote that with all of our education missions, that they incorporate that in all education programs. So I think this idea that every program we do should be inclusive, not just a standalone disability program. Although sometimes with very specific populations, that work is also important. But we know that when you apply a universal design to learning, it makes it better for all students, not just students with disabilities. So it does make it more accessible, but everybody learns better. So that's extremely important. One note that I want to make is actually the work we've been doing with the government in Nigeria around deaf education. So we just launched a program with Gallaudet University, which is, I believe, the only university in the world. It's here in Washington, D.C., that does all of its lessons in education in American Sign Language. And they just launched a program to make education more accessible to deaf and hard of hearing students in Nigeria. So again, we take this kind of multiple pronged approach to disability. And then on gender-based violence, I know our colleagues in the Africa Bureau here at USAID recently did a guidance note and another toolkit on gender-based violence. You can find all of those tools and resources on USAID's website, EduLinks. So maybe I'll just, to be brief, I'll stop there and let Sally take a stab at that question.
No, thanks, Liana. So, yeah, so I mean, really good question and really good challenge on children with disabilities. So we absolutely we mustn't lose that in our push for girls' education. And actually, there's a really strong interlinkage, because we know that girls with a disability are most disadvantaged. So, I mean, we have got something through our Girls' Education Challenge. We funded quite significant programs specifically targeted on girls with a disability. As donors, this is always a chat, you know, it does cost more money and we have to recognize it does. But it's absolutely an important part of the agenda. So I think it's really important we don't lose that when we talk about girls' education. It's you know, in quotes, because obviously we're talking about marginalized girls, and girls with a disability are clearly you know, the most marginalized. So, you know, we are doing work on that still there. We had the Disability Summit, as you probably know, a couple of years ago, on gender-based violence. So this is huge. And so there is a Safe to Learn coalition that we've been quite prominent on in the UK. So leading that international campaign, because it isn't just about programming, it's also about, you know, political prioritization, that this is a major issue. It's a major issue within schools as well as outside of schools. So that's something, you know, Safe to Learn is very much part of our girls' education approach. So I think on the visibility question, it'd be good to get some clarity on that. Is that, I think generally, obviously on visibility, this political campaign is going through that, but yeah, might have more clarity on that question. But so on Safe to Learn, gender-based violence, I suppose the only final point is for us in the education community, be really clear that this can't be solved just in education. It has to be solved in a broader sense about there's legal systems, there's all of the wraparound and the community that we have to work with. So that's something that it means to deal with gender-based violence. We can't solve it in education, it's part of it, but it's a broader coalition of partners. And I'm sure we've got some of those on the line who are far more expert than I am, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Sally and Liana. Very clear responses to complex questions. I'll have just one more question for Barbara, since you're back now. And Barbara, CAMFED has really worked on issues of the cost of education. So one question came in: how can we help adolescent girls mitigate the cost of education, the cost of school fees, so they can continue? It is a unique challenge for post-primary students. So could you talk about successful approaches to mitigate the cost of education?
Yes, thank you. I think the most cost-effective ways of mitigating education is to ensure that schools are as close as possible to the areas where the children live. Most of the girls we deal with are based in rural areas, and they have to walk long distances. And as a result of that, the government has boarding schools, which are quite costly, making it difficult for children from poor families to access education. So the approach is that as much as possible, schools are built closer to where the children are living, and also that they build more day schools so that girls are able to walk to school instead of boarding, which has a lot of hidden costs. In addition to boarding costs, there are so many hidden costs. But also the fact that cost of education that includes a lot of other things, include uniform, they include teaching and learning materials, and all those raise the cost of education to the extent that a lot of vulnerable girls do not get the opportunity because of that cost of meeting the fees that come with education. So the most cost-effective ways would be ensure that we have schools closer to where the children are living. We avoid also introduce a lot of day schools so that girls are able to walk to school, but also ensure that we get support from the peers. We know in Camfed we have the Camfed Association, the young women who themselves have gone through a difficult period getting into school, but they are also stepping up and supporting other girls to go to school. And in Camfed, what we are finding is that a number of Kama girls will support at least 3 girls with the minimum cost of going into school by providing learning materials, by helping them with fees themselves, by also, so a community-based support for girls will also be a good way of mitigating the cost of education, because what we find is that these young women rally behind the needs of the girls that they are supporting in the rural areas and provide at community level meals, for example, for those that are walking into school. They provide sanitary wear, for example, to ensure that girls are protected in school, and all sorts of support programs that they work around. So what we think is that community collegialship helps to support girls in school and ensures that as many of the girls as possible are able to access education. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Natasha.
Thank you so much to our panel for that wonderful and lively discussion. We really appreciate you. And right now, hi, Dewey. You're joining us from Vietnam. Okay, so Dewey will be giving us a speech. Over to you, Dewey.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi.
It's Chow from Roundtable. I am the communication officer, and we are waiting for Yui to be online. Just wait a little bit. Yes, okay.
Great.
Okay, so Yui, you may say hi with everyone. Yes, and I think you can share about your story with everyone today.
Okay. Hello everyone. Xin chào. It's great to be here. My name is Yi. I'm 16 years old and I have been in Roundtable Girls Education Program for 6 years. I'm happy to be joining you today to share my story and how Roundtable has supported me to change my life. I'm from Javin, a small province in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. It's a poor and remote community located 2 hours away from the nearest city with little educational opportunities. Most of the people in Javin are farmers, including my parents. We are a family of 4, my father, mother, my older brother, and me. Even though my parents did not have access to the internet and education, but they understand the importance of it and always encourage us to study. Vietnam is experiencing its 2nd year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, when the COVID-19 had not spread as widely in Vietnam as it had this year, I could go to school and attend classes in person. However, this year, there are school closures and they have to study online from home. Like many other girls around the world, studying at home has a big challenge for me. At first, I At first, I had difficulty of managing my time, and I very much miss a social connection that can be going to school. But the life skills and education have been, and support I have received from Room to Read have given me the knowledge and skills to help me find solutions to these problems. For example, I really enjoy learning English. During pandemic, I was unable to go to school to study English with my teachers and friends. Thanks to problem-solving skills I have learned, I did not give up and found a solution to study English online by myself. I visit websites like Facebook, YouTube, Google, TikTok that provide lessons for English learners. I know many students do not have access to the internet, so I'm grateful to have these online resources. And thanks to the time management skills I have learned in Room to Read life skills classes, I can manage my self-study time more properly. If I have exam at school and lots of homework, I will spend time studying English on the weekends. And if there are times when I feel discouraged, I apply persistence and motivation skills to help me remember the reasons why I started learning English in the first place, so that I can inspire to study harder. I would not be where I am today without the role of my social mobilizer, Ms. who is a local Room to Read mentor to me and other girls in our community. Throughout the pandemic, she has kept connecting with us through online group mentoring activities. She has given me a lot of advice on how to keep a healthy diet, how to take care of ourselves and during COVID-19, and how to study effectively online. I cannot wait for the day we can be back in school so that I can rejoin these classes and mentoring activities in person. I have two great hopes for the future. One, that our children in the world can have access to school and can become global change leaders in their communities. And the second, my dream for my future self is to become an English interpreter. I love the idea of working in an environment where I can continue to pursue my passion in learning English language. And I want to help people who come from different parts of the world connect and understand one another. I will always be grateful for the opportunity to pursue an education and to have such amazing support from Room to Read. I know I will not let these opportunities go to waste. Thank you so much for listening to my story and discussing the important topic of girls' education. Change is possible, and you all are making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dewey, for sharing your story with us. We are very happy to hear your story. You said you're 16 years old and your mother has been encouraging you to go to school because she knows it is not easy for a girl to pursue an education.
Yes, Natasha. Yeah, okay, you just continue. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us what the most difficult challenges are for a 16 years old girl who wants to complete her schooling? Challenges other than homework and getting good grades?
Yes, Natasha, because your English is not very good, so I will be the translator in Vietnamese, and then you can answer the question. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Duy ơi, cái câu hỏi á, là câu đầu tiên là đối với em 16 tuổi thì ở những cái vùng quê như thế này thì em được đi học, nhưng mà em có cảm thấy là có những cái thử thách nào khác đối với các bạn nữ sinh hay không? Thì em cứ trả lời theo cái câu hỏi mà mình đã có chia sẻ ha. Rồi, cảm ơn em.
Thanks for your question. There are two big challenges for girls like me in Vietnam who try to go to school or finish their studies. First, there is the difficulty of making friends in class and getting used to a new environment from secondary school to high school. It is very hard for many girls who are shy. Some of them do not have any friends in the whole school year. So then they don't feel the joy of going to school and they drop out. Secondly, there is a lack of direction and self-awareness. There is no guidance for girls like me, and no one teaches us the importance of studying. It is hard to know what we are good at and what we are not good at. So a lot of girls just do the option of getting married early or leaving school for work to earn money for their families. These challenges make me feel very lucky that I joined Roundtable. We learn how to communicate better. We also receive career advices, which help us see a different future. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dewey. You've just reminded me of some of the similar challenges that myself and other girls faced from your response. Faye, over to you.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Dewey, for your contributions to this discussion and your powerful stories. We are just a minute over time, so I will wrap up as quickly as I can by taking us back to where we started, and really to urge us all to recommit to girls' secondary education. We also had a fantastic message from Dewey that change is possible. And I think Tessie set us up with a brilliant challenge right at the beginning to really engage our minds and our work in this wicked problem that we have to solve. So I really need to take this opportunity to thank FCDO, USAID, CAMFED, Room to Read, and our outstanding youth participants, Natasha and Dewey. We will be sharing a video contribution from the government of Nigeria with you all after the event. And we really would encourage you to join our mailing list from the email that you'll receive shortly after for details of the next event in this series. And really thank you all for such a stimulating discussion and for everything that you're doing for adolescent girls globally. So thank you.